Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ISC2 New Jersey Chapter's podcast, Unencrypted Chatter. Today, we're talking about ISC2 certifications, the exam prep process, as well as how our chapter supports members as they approach this critical part of a security professional's career. At some point, every one of us is going to face having to take an exam, get some letters that we can add to our email signature in the form of certification. Joining me today are some special guests from the chapter. We have Alex and Lindsay here to discuss this important topic. Also got my co-host here, Reggie. We're going to start with a quick round of introductions and then dive into the study, exam prep, and test-taking strategies that can help you to be successful when approaching these exams. I'll kick off. My name is Kraus. I am both a CISSP and CCSP holder. I have taught exam prep for both of these certifications since about 2015, so coming up on the decade mark here. I have also written, co-written, and/or technical edited a bunch of books and materials related to these certifications. So the CISSP and CCSP CBKs, official study guides, and official practice exams. With that, I'll hand it over to Reggie.
Hey, good afternoon or evening, whenever you're watching this, to everyone. My name is Reggie Alford. I'm a CISSP holder as of March of 2024. Most of my test prep was done via self-paced study and group study, just showing that wherever you are at in your career, whether you are most seniored or at the tail end of that 5 years of experience, with hard work and diligence, you can take and pass the CISSP.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Pierre. I do have active certifications in incident handling and penetration testing, but now I'm attempting the CISSP, and I know it's broader in scope, and I'm looking forward to working with the ISC2 chapter to succeed at this stage of my career.
So hey guys, Alex Velez here, and thank you so much for having me. As for the kind of certifications and stuff I've worked with, I have currently from CompTIA A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. And for ISC2, I currently have the Certified in Cybersecurity, which is the CC, and the SSCP, which is the Systems Security Professional one. And I'm actually also interested in getting the CISSP, and lucky for me, I actually just won a scholarship to be able to take the exam.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you both for joining us today and sharing your experience. Really looking forward to this. Alex, to the point that you made, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the chapter scholarship. What was the process, or what did that look like to go after it? And what benefits do you think that offers to help you on your career goals?
Sure. So last year, around the mid part of the year, ISC2 chapter, the New Jersey chapter was talking about a scholarship that was being run on behalf of the Center of Cybersecurity and Education, which is at imcybersafe.org. And they were basically offering people to be able to get some of their tuition paid for the exam costs. So I applied to that. And while I wasn't able to get that particular scholarship, it turns out that in 2024, I was able to volunteer a lot for the chapter. So I do a lot of things behind the scenes for the New Jersey chapter for ISC2. And it turns out that at the end of the year, I got surprised with a really cool plaque that said I was the volunteer of the year. And that's when they gave me that lovely surprise saying that they were going to be able to help me pay for the cost of the exams. Because it's no secret that this exam has quite the hefty price tag. And as far as how is this going to help me overall in my career, I think it's really going to help me not only do a lot more of what I do in cyber, but it's also going to give me that validation to be able to really do more of the business side, to be able to talk about risk and to be able to really cement that seat at that table.
I think I'd add one thing to that, just as a shout out to something that one of our co-chairs does on the membership committee. We talk a lot about career transitioning. Sam actually presented about that at Security Congress back in October, and that was one of the challenges she spoke about, was the cost being a barrier to entry. So if you're looking at the exam fee and saying, hey, I can't afford this, but I'm interested in career transitioning, stuff like the chapter's scholarship is definitely a way to help out those career transitioners.
But awesome. So Lindsay, you're currently preparing for the exam. What strategies are you using, and how is the New Jersey chapter here at ISC2 assisting with that, the study group in particular?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Reggie. It's an important milestone to study for the CISSP for me, because The other certifications I've done on my own, it was always an uphill battle. If you study in a silo and if you have to try to, Google things and research things, I always thought that collaboration brings, in terms of me, collaboration brings more learning. That's primarily what I seek to gain from the study group. It's our first week set off, so we do have a schedule in terms of doing some pre-assessment questions. We have maybe like 4 chapters a week. And once we get to that point, we start reviewing those chapters and review chapter questions and so on. So I look forward to that type of rudimentary study within the group.
Awesome.
Follow-up question on that, Lindsay. Do you find that having a group like that is helping you to stay accountable? Is that helping with the approach to the exam? I know we all have lots of stuff going on, so kind of like having a trainer to help you.
Yeah, I agree, Aaron. I mean, like I said before, I'm custom studying on my own, the self-study and self-pace. It works, and you maintain that discipline, but you can definitely benefit more from a group study because the collaboration enhances your learning greatly, I believe.
I always felt a little bit like a fraud when I was teaching my exam prep classes, but oftentimes if somebody was really struggling with a concept, having other students in the classroom to explain it in a different way or from a different perspective, sometimes that helped me overcome those and led to a breakthrough for the student. So definitely having that support is critical. Alex,
Absolutely.
back to you. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say absolutely, and I feel that because the thing is, I'm a student also at Western Governors University, which is a only online school. And while they do give me the benefit of helping me out with a lot of the certifications, I don't get that conversation to be able to help me with basically going the back and forth with that study prep. So that's one of those things that I completely agree. It's nice to have that boot camp.
May not be a universal experience, but I know at least for me, the local public library has obviously resources. It's something I'll talk about a little bit later in terms of exam prep, but also community space where folks can meet. And I know that there's a cybersecurity study meetup group that has occasionally formed when enough people are approaching an exam like this. I live in the DC area, so lots of folks need this as a part of their job, either CISSP or CCSP. So I've seen those occasionally on like meetup.com or the library's website for the community center.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned the public library because that's actually where I'm coming in live from.
Nice.
They are great resources, especially when you're talking about exam prep books. They're like $70, $80 each, and cost of entry can be a significant thing, especially for those career transitioners.
Not only that, but honestly, just having a quiet place to study. Because especially when you've got a lot going on at home, reading that book is more painful than it should be.
Yeah, it definitely can be.
Back in 2011, I had the benefit of an office with a door that closed. That was before the open office thing.
Oh my goodness, luxury.
I wouldn't be able to study at work nowadays, even after hours, because I'd have too many people talking over me. Other than rowdy coworkers who interrupt your studying, Alex, I wonder if there are any surprises that you have encountered in preparing for, or even in taking any of the exams that you've taken in the past.
Definitely. So, kind of like piggybacking on my answer before, the first one was definitely the challenge of finding a place to study. And like I said, when you have a lot of things going on at home and being able to sit down and concentrate was difficult. So I found myself really looking at the free resources I had in my neighborhoods, such as my public library, my college library, and I've even gone to like a mall and sat at a food court. Actually, I did that right before I took the SSCP. And a surprise during the test, and this was my introduction to the ISC2 like exam templates because they're very different from CompTIA, was the fact that when you're reading your question, they don't give you the ability to be able to review. So you have to read that question and you have to commit to your answer because there's no way to go back. So that definitely caught me by surprise.
That's good to know.
Yeah, that's a change from the way that the exams used to be. So if anyone has taken a cert before what was known as the computerized adaptive testing, or the CAT test came into place, you used to be able to go back on the computerized test. You could flag an answer. Obviously, with paper-based test, you could do anything that you wanted, go back and forth or answer questions out of order. But with the new algorithmic-based testing, you have to answer the question before you move on. So that's actually been a change when I'm teaching for my students of what their exam taking strategy needs to look like.
Yeah, so that's why I'm always recommending people to take the CC, which is the certified in cybersecurity, since it is generously offered for free under the 1 million certified campaign. I always tell people up front, so it's a great opportunity, but let me just make sure you don't get surprised like I did during the test. Just read your question well, because there's no going back. You have to commit.
Yeah, that's a big time tip, because it does totally change how you approach taking a test. When I set for the CISA, it was linear, and you can go back and forth and skip and focus in on those questions that you knew that were at the top of your mind, and then go back to those things later. It was a big adjustment, probably like around question 2025, with knowing, hey, you only get that one shot to answer this particular question correctly. And with that in mind, everyone, or Aaron in particular, what did you use to prepare for the CISSP?
Back in my day, it was still paper-based, so I had to get stone and chisel out to take all of my notes. Definitely did a lot of reading, looked at all of the different resources that were available, particularly the books, like the official study guide, like what is sometimes known as the Sean Harris Guide or the All-in-One CISSP. Definitely made sure that I had a solid source of information to study from, and then had to employ some learning techniques, actually get all that knowledge in my mind. So two that were very helpful for me and that I recommended to all of my students were flashcards and mind maps. Hopefully everyone is familiar with both. Mind map, you center a concept, and then have radial branches for related concept. Big, complicated, very nuanced topics like cryptography were really well suited to that. So you put cryptography there in the center, you have asymmetric versus symmetric, and then branching off from those even further, you have various terms and applications. Things like streaming versus block ciphers, different key lengths, different terminology associated with cryptography. I guess nowadays you would have to have a bubble on there for quantum as well. That was very helpful when approaching exam questions, especially the scenario-based ones where a lot of information is thrown at you, and it's up to you to figure out how it all kind of fits together. Having that visual representation was very useful for me. Flashcards, also something that you should be familiar with. Term or concept on one side, definition on the other. What I put into practice, though, was a stack-ranked system of flashcards. I had an A stack, a B stack, and a C stack. A was the stuff that I knew really well, reviewed once a week. B was stuff I was less familiar with, reviewed a couple times a week. And stack was anything that I was learning for the first time, so stuff that I really needed more work on. And the goal was to eventually promote everything up to that A stack. So it gave me a way to prioritize the flashcards. I did the C stack every single day. And as I started to get more familiar, promoted those up to the B stack. Obviously, didn't want to demote anything, but if I did have something that just wouldn't stick, I could put it back into more frequent rotation. So that really helped get all that information in my brain. Brain dumped it on the exam. And then, of course, once you pass the exam, you can always go back to a reference guide. So no need to keep it memorized after that.
Love that idea, Aaron. Actually, there's a little program called Anki. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it. It does exactly the same thing. It can stack your questions in not necessarily ladders of difficulty, but in terms of how you answer it. So the frequency in which they come back really determines on the difficulty of the question. So your difficult question, you get it back more frequently. Less difficult, less frequently, and so on until you build that A stack, B stack automatically. It's called ANKI. Very, very useful. So thanks for that. I made me remember what to do next.
Yeah, there are definitely apps. Over the years, ISC2 has also released some official apps that include like flashcards. Alex got them up on the phone now.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's called the LearnZapp app.
The LearnZ?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That app is awesome. And what I took advantage of when I was studying for the CISSP is not only did I buy the physical book, I would also try to get my hands on the audio book as well, and the rides into work. Even as I was lullabying myself to sleep, I listened to the CISSP books on my way to sleep, on my way to work, lunch break. After reading so many hundreds of pages, your eyes get weary, they get tired, but your ears would be less tired, or get tired less likely than your eyes. So 1.5 speed, 1.25 speed on a 20-minute ride to work. That always went a long way. And to kind of like circle back to what you guys were talking about with your systematic approaches to how you were divvying up your flashcards. I did something similar with the practice examinations, and I kind of went overboard. I probably bought like around 10 different books and study guides, but they all came with their fair share of practice questions. I would take the practice examinations and tests, print everything out. And I had a system similar to what you were explaining, Lindsay, but probably a little bit more layman, where I categorized everything as red light, yellow light, green light. Green lights, green lights, I categorize those as layups. That's something that I know. I know it fully. I know the concept. It's not memorization. I'm not really paying much attention to those questions. The yellow light is I either guessed right or memorized it correctly, but I didn't necessarily know the concept behind why I got that question right. I just know port 80 was used for this, or this port number was used for that, and I kind of tethered it to memory. So those I would touch again to try to get an idea on the concept. And my red was something that I really didn't know. I either even if I guessed it right and I didn't know, I still put that in the red light stack, and I will go back into those concepts and study those over and over again until I can matriculate those from red to yellow and into green before sitting down for the test. So that went a long way for me, and I think a lot of people had to get that mindset too, where you can have all the book knowledge per se, but the CISSP more so than the other examinations I sat for, it is a mindset. You're not a doer, you are a manager. And you have to take it from that standpoint. So if you go in there with a manager mindset, like I don't necessarily need to touch everything, I'm going to be delegating and I need to have overarching information, like that can go a long way with being successful with taking a test. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, I got that one. That's an awesome book. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, the audiobooks go a long way. And another thing that I'll say too is visualize passing that test. It's really mind over matter in many instances. It's such a big time endeavor that sometimes people can cheat themselves out of the experience having the anxiety tied to or associated with taking a test. Many of us want to move up in our career, transition into a new career. We have a lot going on and going into taking the test that can throw you off. So what I did to kind of like to get my mind ready and make sure that I was in the best space as far as my thought process goes, I subscribed to a couple of subreddits on Reddit of people who have recently taken the CISP, and I as one coworker told me many years ago, chew the meat, spit the bones. If I found something that resonated with me as far as someone's test taking strategies, I adopted that. I read people's success stories, I read people's failure stories, and instead of gaining the knowledge, I took the wisdom from their experiences and applied it to mine. So I would suggest that to anyone who is thinking about taking a test, is preparing for taking a test, read other people's success stories, also read the failure stories, and visualize passing the test. For
That's a
me,
great
that went a long way.
That's great advice, Reggie. I mean, there's sometimes you think that when you study, you can skip some
Hmm.
pages, skip some, jump to the jump to conclusion. And I found that with IT, you can't just skip some pages and jump to conclusion. You need
Not at
to
all.
you need to turn the page by page. And funny, one thing I do mention, that pre-assessment questions are before every chapter. It's amazing how much they actually prepare you for what the chapter entails. And And so you realize, no, you don't just skip pages, like, let me just go to chapter 1. No, read those pre-assessment questions. See if there's anything else there that you actually know. And if you don't know, then you know what to expect within that chapter. And I think that helps with the learning process also. It helps
Big
me.
time.
Yeah.
We're jumping way ahead here, but that gets to something that I'll offer at the end, which is, getting prepared to actually take the exam. What do you do when you finished all of your studying, or how do you prioritize the study work that you do? And Lindsay, that's a great point, figuring out what you already know and spending less time studying that in the materials and prioritizing the stuff that you don't know as well. Alex, it was always a very clear kind of like left brain, right brain split in my classes. We had the engineers and we had the policy people, and the engineers had never written a policy. So the GRC chapter, asset security, was totally brand new to them. I had a bunch of folks from a network security and more IT background that fell into that category. And then I had like the auditors and the policy writers who network security and telecoms. Reggie, to your point, I was like, you will have to memorize a bunch of ports. You will never use it again from memory. You'll be able to look it up on Wikipedia if needed. So memorize port 80, memorize port 21 for the purpose of the exam, and then look it up if it ever comes up in real life. Speaking of the exam, assuming that you finished studying, assuming that you've successfully passed, congratulations. Reggie, as our most recent exam passer, what really happens after the exam? What does that process look like? What things do you have to do once you've achieved that milestone? Is there still more work that has to happen?
Yeah, there's a little bit of legwork that you have to go through before you get that wonderful certificate and pen sent to you from the great folks at ISC2, and that is being sponsored by someone who is a CISSP holder, and that was the greatest part about joining the ISC2 New Jersey chapter. I joined in January, and I set for the CISSP examination at the end of March. And prior to joining the chapter, I may know maybe one or two CISPs, and then in joining the chapter, I had access to and was able to talk to and lightly be mentored by dozens of CISPs. And it got to the point where I announced that I had passed the test preliminarily, and more than 5 or 6 people reached out to me personally and offered to sponsor me. So whereas other people may have to search long and hard to find a sponsor, or you can go through the self-sponsoring or the auditing by ISC2, which slows down the process as far as getting you cleared and everything, as far as your official certification and PIN. Um, Being a part of the chapter and meeting those additional CISPs and interfacing with them led to me having a quicker turnaround. And I had the esteemed pleasure of being sponsored by Ken Fishkin. So that was awesome.
Hey, that's right.
Lovely chapter president.
Yes.
So Reggie, if I jump in with that question, in 3 months, you did it between January and March.
No. I joined it. I joined the New Jersey ISC2 chapter in January. One of my coworkers had seen me studying for the CISSP, and she's like, I know a guy. He leads a group. You should look into that. And in one ear and out the other. And then I did some digital stalking of Ken, and I saw all the nice and great and wonderful things that the chapter was doing. Um, and then I just reached out and I jumped in, and it's been full steam ahead. As far as my exam prep started in, I would say, the summer of 2023. Pardon me, the summer of 2024. I was aiming to take it at the end of, no, I'm getting my years mixed up. It started in the summer of 2023. It's planning to take it at the end of 2023. Things got hectic and it ended up being pushed out into the first quarter of 2024. So altogether, my study time was probably like 9 to 10 months, and intense for probably like a good 3 months of those, because I was supposed to take it in December and I pushed it to March. But there were many mornings getting up at 5 a.m. in the morning and getting that two hours in before work, and maybe like another hour or so after
Wow.
work.
I thought I was the only one.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
wife, kids, family, life, professional already, you got to balance all those things.
Make
If you
time for
if you want
yourself.
it, you got to go get it.
Make time for yourself. Yep.
Yeah.
So true. And then I can give you a perspective as well as I actually took the SSCP last year, and the process was more or less the same. A lot of just early nights, early mornings, late nights, just trying to study
Mm-hmm.
in between. And then ultimately, you kind of mentioned the auditing. I'm glad that you brought that up. because I got audited because I didn't use the people in the chapter to sponsor me originally. I went with someone else that I knew, and unfortunately, they didn't answer in time, which severely delayed my stuff. So then I also had the pleasure of being sponsored by Ken, and that's kind of what that difference of being in the chapter makes. That once I had like people who were active and answering, it made getting that certification and completing it so much easier.
Yep, does big time.
I guess plug for all of the chapter stuff that goes on. In addition to Ken sponsoring everyone, we also have all of the education resources. So things like the boot camps, study groups that are sponsored by the chapter. Keep an eye out for emails or announcements in the newsletter. Shout out to the newsletter committee, but keep an eye out for announcements about the study resources that are available. One other thing, just once you've finished all of the process, you have, to Reggie's point, that certificate and the PIN in hand. ISC2 certifications are ongoing, so they do require continuing education. So that's also a part of maintaining your certification. You do education units and also pay an annual maintenance fee or an AMF. That's currently $135 for all of the certifications that you hold. So multiple certification holders, you still pay the one AMF. ISC2, introduced the Certified in Cyber, which is kind of their entry level, and they have a big program for 1 million people to get that. So basically, the first 1 million people have the ability to sign up. There's free exam prep. You get a free exam voucher, and I believe it's a $50. Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, that you pay to register for the exam, but otherwise it's much lower, and that I think speaks to the point that we were talking about for career transitioners. It significantly lowers that barrier to entry.
It certainly does, and it actually is kind of what brought me to the chapter. So I took the Certified in Cyber back in like February of 2023, and that's how I found out about the New Jersey chapter, because once I joined and I paid the AMF, I had said, why don't you join your local chapter? And I'm based out of New Jersey, and that's kind of how I came in. And like, honestly, the rest is history. My life has changed tenfold just from being a part of this and being surrounded by people in the community.
Well, you've been instrumental to chapter 2, Alex. So
I appreciate that, guys.
Volunteer of the year here.
Yeah.
Well deserved, too. Well deserved.
I appreciate that. So that's why,
woman.
like I said, it was quite the surprise that, even though I didn't get the scholarship from the I Am Cyber Safe, that I did apply, and that was a lot of pages. It was quite touching to feel that everything's kind of coming in all at once. All of the memories that I've made in 2024 by being an active member of the New Jersey chapter and holding that plaque. Well, holding the plaque and my camera on the other, my other hand.
And at least a couple of mics here and there as well. Of
course.
Indeed.
Yep.
So, Aaron, what advice would you give students that are preparing for the exam?
Yeah, over 10 years of teaching, this has changed significantly. Reggie, you already hit the one, whatever you want to call it, whether that's manifesting or positive mindset or just don't psych yourself out, see the success there. Think about it in terms of, hey, I'm going to do this. What do I need to be successful there? The positive mindset, a good night's rest before the exam. And, if you're taking it, eat a hearty breakfast, so you got some fuel.
Eye drops. I'm serious, break. It's a long exam, so I would step out. I would get some water and then also eye drops to the eyes.
Yeah, and to that point, make sure, since they're administered now through the Pearson View Education Centers, make sure you read all of the instructions for what you bring, what you can't bring, what you might need to do to check in, so you don't miss your appointment for taking the exam. I've taken 2 exams at Pearson View Centers, different ones that had slightly different procedures. One said arrive 10 minutes early. The other one was at least half an hour early. They had a much more robust security process to actually get into the building because of where they were in an office park. So you keep an eye out for that and follow all of those rules. I think in terms of actually studying to prepare for the exam, one thing, going back to some of the topics that we've touched on here, Alex, to your point, an audiobook might be a better medium for certain learners. Also, make sure that you're picking the correct materials based on your learning style. For me personally, the all-in-one CISSP guide, sometimes known as the Sean Harris guide, the lady who started that was wonderful. She was a great teacher, but her writing style was just too conversational for me, so I would lose the point. my ADHD kicked in, and by the time I made it to the end of her 3 paragraphs of narrative, I forgot the point that I was supposed to be about. So for me, CISSP for Dummies, short 2-paragraph intro and then bullet points. That is exactly what my brain needed to absorb. The narrative prose in the other one just didn't work for me. Whereas I know other folks like the CISSP for Dummies, it's too dry. I need explanations. I need somebody to kind of guide me like a teacher would in a classroom. So make sure you take a look at what's going to work best for you. Shout out again to your public library. Many of them will have these kind of materials, so you can see which one work better for you. Read a couple chapters before you commit to buying one, if that's what you plan to do. Other exam prep strategies, and this is something that really infuriates a lot of people, and I love them, but a lot of engineers, they want a right answer, and the CISSP is not checking to see if you can get the right answer, checking to see if in a real world scenario where there are multiple options, you can pick the rightest answer or the least wrong answer. So kind of learning that mindset, practicing those exam prep, the official exam prep questions, and getting comfortable with that kind of weird, there really is no right answer, but this one's okay-ish. Like, that doesn't feel natural if you've been to take multiple choice tests, but the reality is that's what the exam looks like. Final thing that I always tell people, don't overthink it. I overthought my Security Plus, which I actually took after CISSP, to knock 1 year off the requirement for CISSP, and I re-overthought stuff that I worked on a day-to-day basis. Risk management, business continuity. I did worse in those domains on the Security Plus exam than I did on telecom and network security stuff, which I wasn't working in because I didn't know as much about it. I didn't overthink the question, so I just picked the right answer, had a better result there. It's very easy to get stuck in your head. These are scenario-based questions. They're going to be complicated, so don't complicate it further. Final little thing that I always tell people as a bit of a hack, you do get the ability to make a cheat sheet. You don't get to bring anything in the exam center with you. I want to be very clear about that. But when you go in, you get a dry erase board or some pieces of paper, and if there's stuff in your brain that you're afraid is going to, leave you halfway through, like say the formula for symmetric key cryptography, at the beginning of your exam period, you can write all that stuff down on the piece of paper. If there's stuff that you memorize, like mnemonics, that you want to put down there, I always tell people, take like the first 5-ish minutes, write down that stuff you're afraid of as a little cheat sheet that you can use later on. Totally legit. Again, you can't bring a cheat sheet with you, but you can make one when you sit down at your computer.
So it helps to break down the question. So I do take the dry erase board and I will write keywords as I'm reading the question, like the most, the least. That way I know what to focus on, because when you're reading over a paragraph of a scenario question, you kind of forgot the point halfway through. Exactly, which is I'm highlighting basically those keywords as I'm taking the test. So like, for example, when I took the SSCB, I had to do that because again, they were so long, and that one word changes the entire inflection of that question. So that's definitely.
And you will have multiple questions that call back to the same scenario, so knowing the key parts of the scenario so that you can answer questions from different perspectives is useful. Right. Definitely make use of practice exams to do that as well. I can vouch for the official guide. I'm the technical editor. I've read every question in there. I always told folks, if you're hitting like 80-90% on those practice exams, you're probably ready to take the real world one.
And did your brain have to tell you I'm in this domain? Or Reggie, you can answer. Did your brain have to tell you, look, this question is from this domain, or this question belongs to this domain? Like, did you go through that scenario, or you just jumped into the question full steep?
For the most part, you kind of get a feel for what domain that you're in, and that's why it's good to know, engage, and have an idea of where you're strong and where you're weak, because it is a CAT exam. You're going to be fed a certain amount of questions from a particular domain, and once you test out of that domain, you test it out of that domain, so that the remaining or your questions are going to come from the domains that you either haven't received questions in or you were weak in. So the domain you're most weak in is the domain you're going to get the most questions in. So you have to make sure that you got to make sure that you're well-rounded across all those domains. And another thing that, or a bit of advice I would give to someone is pace. Sometimes we get into these examinations, and when we're sitting at home and we're practicing that 100 question or that 125 question stack, the wife is cooking, the kids are yelling, the doorbell rang, you got to go run an errand or do something, and you walk away and you come back a half an hour later, 20 minutes later or so, and you pick up. And you really are not gauging how much time it's taking you to go through those 100, 125 questions. It's a lot of reading. And what I've noticed, even in the testing facility, when I was taking the test, I'm watching guys, even though they're sitting next to me out of my peripheral vision, have mental fatigue. They're running out of steam because they're on their 80th question and their 90th question, and perhaps in a test prep, they never took 80 questions in one shot, 100 questions in one shot. And towards the end of my examination prep, I was making sure that I was good as far as pace went. And if the test is going to be at least 125 questions, well, every time I sit down, I'm gonna make sure I'm in a headspace where I can answer 125 questions in a row, so that I was training my eyes and my brain. Like, okay, we're going to work for the next couple of hours or the next hour and a half to get through these questions. So the day of the test, you don't have fatigue. You've trained your mind to be strong enough to get through at least
Yeah,
125 questions.
I'm so glad you
you
brought
did
that up.
5 hours, 300 questions with Sam.
Like I said, I'm so glad you brought that up, because when I took the SSCP, like when they asked me how was it, I said, I am so tired. And it was just because that test stamina, I felt myself losing steam into like an hour and a half into it. And I still had
That's what
another,
Aaron said. Aaron said
you have to
a good
practice.
night's sleep. Yeah, he said a
Definitely.
good night's sleep before, the night before, a good night's sleep. Make sure you have some breakfast or at least some nourishment, good nourishment for that day. It's really, really important that your mind is balanced. Like Reggie says, you have a positive mindset. But you also, you take care of your body and rest and for that particular day.
Yeah, and luckily for me, going into the test, I had tons of PTO left over, and I took 4 days off. I took a Thursday, Friday. I tested on Tuesday, so I had Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was off Monday, and I did a little bit of studying the night before the test, but I made it very light going into the test. I arrived at the testing facility an hour and a half early, and I was like, I'm going to do some studying before the test after I had checked in. And I was like, you know what? Close the laptop, close the book. I trusted my process, and I went in and I started my test about 40 minutes early. So just trust your process, do all the prerequisite studying, the reading, the testing and pounding the information, and cross your fingers and give it your best effort, and things typically work out in your favor. And even if they don't, you can always go back to the drawing board and retake. And a lot of people have taken advantage of that the promotion that they run, where you basically get 2 attempts for a little bit more than what it would cost you for the price of the one voucher. And it comes in far less than if you had to take the test and then rebuy another voucher. I believe the test at the time I took it was about what, $600, $500, something like that. And they had the take it again. I forget what they called it. I forget, they had a name or a term that they used for this particular promotion, but that 2-in-1 was about $900.
And a lot of people, that cost will be included in something like a boot camp that will come with an exam voucher. Most of those are the that include the retake option. So definitely make sure you're aware of what options are available to you.
And Reggie, how often after you took that exam, did that knowledge help you that you could reach back in your mind and say, oh yeah, I got this from the CISSP?
I lived the CISSP for about 3 months, man. Every day, it's almost to the point my wife became a de facto information security professional, because I watched so many YouTube videos, and um, sometimes when I got a question wrong, she would reread the question, and even as like a novice, de facto by proxy, she would get things right that I was getting wrong. And once again, it goes back to the semantics of the question. Reggie, you read the question, but you didn't give credence to the least or the most or the not. So so things like that. But yeah.
Or you fell into the trap of overthinking it, and a novice approaching it just reads the question at face value. Yep. I was going to say, parting thought from me, for those of you who've taken and passed exams, congratulations. Awesome to have you in the profession. To anybody who is in the process of studying for and getting one, best of luck, and make sure you make use of all the resources available, whether at the chapter or your local chapter if you're listening outside New Jersey, or other resources that might be available to you at your company or through other affinity groups. And best of luck. Great to see everybody joining the profession, and look forward to welcoming more new members.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you for joining us for this episode. The podcast is now on major platforms, including YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. And you can follow us on most social medias as well. It would be helpful if you could subscribe and share our podcast. That'd be much appreciated. Rate it, review it, help us improve and reach a broader audience. There's lots more in store in Unencrypted Chatter, the podcast from the ISC2 New Jersey chapter. Thanks to Alex and Lindsay, our esteemed guests, for joining us today and sharing their experiences on this critical part of our security profession. Thanks to my co-hosts. And the biggest thanks to you, our listeners. One last parting gift. Aaron spoke about making sure that you're studying according to your style. For my visual learners out there, the what is this? Destination CISSP. These guys are great. They have tons of mind map videos on YouTube. They have a series that breaks down each domain of the CISSP. I believe they started cataloging their information for the CCSP as well. They're awesome. This book is full of little bits of nuggets. It's extremely visual, tons of graphs, things that you can take a look at and more easily imprint on into your memory as opposed to just reading this information and listening to the information.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Until next time.